The story of electronic music. What is electronic music? Electronic music is a genre of music that employs electrical musical instruments, digital instruments, or circuitry-based music technology in its creation. It may include both music made using electronic circuits and electromechanics, pure electronic instruments depending entirely on circuitry-based sound generation, for instance, using devices such as an electronic oscillator or synthesizers. Such electromechanical devices include the Hammond organ, the electric piano, and the electric guitar, for example. The first electronic musical devices were developed at the end of the 19th century. During the 1920s and 1930s, some electronic instruments were introduced, and the first compositions featuring them were written. By the 1940s, magnetic audio tape allowed musicians to tape sounds and then modify them by changing the tape speed or direction, leading to the development of electroacoustic tape music in the 1940s. Music produced solely from electronic generators was the first produced in Germany in 1953. Electronic music was also created in Japan and the United States beginning in the 1950s. And the algorithmic composition with computers was first demonstrated in that same decade. Gershon Kingsley. First electronic pop song is credited to a composer named Gershon Kingsley from Germany. Popcorn is an instrumental composed by him in 1969 for the album Music to Moog, released on the Audio Fidelity Records label. Multiple versions of the song have been made, including one made by Hot Butter, which is my favorite, System, Klaus Wunderlich, M&H Band, which is a special DJ remix in 1988, the Boomtang Boys in 1999, and Crazy Frog. The song had been remixed, rearranged, featured in old cartoon animations, music videos. It was even featured on Jim Henson's The Muppets, which was a burlesque-style sketch comedy show first televised in the 50s. The orchestra and ballet of Czechoslovakian television performed the song live in 1977. Kraftwerk. At the same time, a German band named Kraftwerk formed in Dusseldorf, Deutschland in 1969 by Ralf Hutter and Florian Schneider. Widely considered innovators and pioneers of electronic music, Kraftwerk were among the first successful acts to popularize this genre. They joined a quintet known as The Organization, which released one album, Tone Float, in 1970 on RCA Records in the UK. But they split shortly thereafter. Schneider became more interested in synthesizers and decided to acquire one in 1970. The band released two freeform experimental rock albums, Kraftwerk 1970 and Kraftwerk 2 in 1972. The albums were mostly instrumental. Musical improvisation played on a variety of traditional instruments, including guitar, bass, drums, organ, flute, and violin. Both albums are purely instrumental. Hutter and Schneider had invested in newer technology such as the Mini-Moog and the EMS Synthi AKS, helping give Kraftwerk a newer, quote-unquote disciplined sound, much closer to the electronic sound that we know today. Of course, Kraftwerk went on to release classics like Autobahn, Trans-Europe Express, The Man Machine, Computer World, Numbers, Tour de France, and many other classics of electro music. Kraftwerk, of course, is regarded as the most influential electronic music bands in the world. They definitely inspired a big hit song called Planet Rock, the groundbreaking single released on Tommy Boy Records in 1982 and produced by Arthur Baker and John Roby. Funk. Funk is a music genre that originated in African American communities in the mid-1960s when musicians created a rhythmic, danceable, new form of music through a mixture of soul, jazz, and rhythm and blues. It de-emphasized melody in chord progression and focuses on strong rhythmic groove of a bass line played by an electric bassist and drum part played by a percussionist, often at slower tempos than other popular music. Funk typically consists of complex percussive groove with rhythmic instruments playing interlocking grooves that create a hypnotic and danceable feel. Funk originated in the 1960s with James Brown's development of a signature groove that emphasized the downbeat with heavy emphasis on the first beat of every measure, which he called the one, and the application of swung 16th notes and syncopation on all bass lines, drum patterns, and guitar riffs. And rock and psychedelia influenced musicians Sly and the Family Stone, Jimi Hendrix, fostering improvisation in funk. Other musical groups, including Fatback, Kool and the Gang, Earth, Wind and Fire, Chic, BT Express, Loose Ends, Shalimar, the SOS Band, Slave, the Rispers, Cameo, and the Bar-Kays began to adopt and develop Brown's innovations during the 1970s and adding R&B essences to the genre from the early 1970s, while others like Prince, Parliament Funkadelic, and Ohio Players followed Hendrix's path. Funk led to avant-garde funk boogie, a hybrid of electronic music and funk metal, a mix of funk and heavy metal rock music. Then there later came G-Funk, which was a mix of gangster rap and funk, timba, which is a form of funky Cuban dance music and funk jam. It is also the main influence of Washington go-go, a funk subgenre. Funk samples and breakbeats have been used extensively in hip-hop music and electronic dance music. Kool Herc and Grandmaster Flash were DJs from the South Bronx that would use funky break parts of these funk records, and they would keep the dance floors packed at venues that they would oftentimes DJ at. Electro funk. Electro or electro funk is a genre of electronic music in early hip-hop directly influenced by the use of the Roland TR-808 drum machine and funk. Afrika Bambaataa and the Soul Sonic Force. Afrika Bambaataa, born Kevin Donovan, April 19th, 1957. He was an American DJ from the South Bronx, New York, who was instrumental in the early development of hip-hop throughout the 1980s. Afrika Bambaataa is one of the three originators of breakbeat DJing and is respectively known as the grandfather and the Amun-Ra of universal hip-hop culture, as well as the father of the electro-funk sound. Through his co-opting of the street gang, the Black Spades, into music and culture-oriented universal Zulu Nation, he is responsible for spreading hip-hop culture throughout the world. Then we have Boston DJ producer Arthur Baker. Baker's production career started off with a few disco recording sessions in Boston. Legendary disco remixer Tom Moulton, who was signed to Casablanca at the time, was required to release an album of his own as part of the deal for working for the label. Tom's brother Jerry came across the sessions written and recorded by Baker, Tony Carbone, and Larry Wedgeworth. In 1981, Baker moved to New York, where he continued to DJ while pursuing a career as a producer. His first successful single was Happy Days, which he released under the name North End on Emergency Records in 1981 with Tony Carbone. Baker went on to work for hip-hop label Tommy Boy Records, where he produced Afrika Bambaataa and Soul Sonic Force's Planet Rock single, which was a hit in the summer of 1982. This song, combining elements from Kraftwerk recordings like Trans-Europe Express and Numbers. Later that year, using unused tracks from Planet Rock, he later produced Planet Patrol's Play at Your Own Risk single in 1982, another group with a hit album in 1983. Now, Afrika Bambaataa and the Soul Sonic Force was an American hip-hop group from New York City, led by DJ Afrika Bambaataa. The group helped to establish hip-hop music as a genre in early 1980s with songs such as Planet Rock, but were also influential in the birth of electro movement in America overall, as well as modern dance music styles such as electro-funk, freestyle, and the entire Miami bass scene. Arthur Baker and John Roby produced a follow-up track for the group following the groundbreaking Planet Rock. This track took much longer to develop than Planet Rock, with Baker using cocaine as a motivation for creating a follow-up single.
Cocaine is a hell of a drug.
The group was developed for months in Roby's apartment, while Afrika Bambaataa and the Soul Sonic Force were touring the world. Arthur Baker came up with the title of the song called Looking for the Perfect Beat. The track was released in December 1982 and was later ranked at number 13 among the tracks of the year for 1983 by New Music Express magazine. Later releases would include Renegades of Funk and Frantic Situation, with the help of the group Shango. All songs appear in films like Beach Street and others. Parrish. Manuel Joseph Parrish, born May 6, 1958, is an American songwriter, vocalist, and producer. He, along with artists such as Yellow Magic Orchestra, Kraftwerk, Art of Noise, Arthur Baker, John Roby, Jellybean Benitez, Lottie Golden, Richard Scher, and Aldo Marin helped create and define electro in these early 1980s, along with other groups like Nucleus, who really got popular with their song Jam On It and their hit record. His first release was Hip Hop Bebop Don't Stop, issued in 1982, which has later been featured in the film Shaun of the Dead, in video game Grand Theft Auto Vice City, which sold millions of copies. The term hip-hop was a jazz music term, but rap was something different at that time. According to Parrish entitled the song with that terminology in mind. Hip-hop was referring to moving your hips, bebop referring to dance. The song actually means literally, keep dancing to the music and don't stop. Another interesting fact to bring up is just how hip-hop bebop was actually created. Hip-hop bebop was recorded by hand, so to speak. This was before MIDI and computer sequencers. Manny bought a TR Roland 808. He was actually the first guy in New York City to even have one. He used the Prophet synth to get some really heavy and cool tom sounds that you'll hear in the track. They layered vocals later on when he got into a bigger studio as an outtake with other elements like the hi-hats and other sounds. So the foundation of the song was basically recorded in his own home with a Tascam half-inch tape recorder. This contained the drums, the bass, the keyboard parts, the sequencing lines, which was used as an Oberheim expander module and some other sound effects. What was on the Tascam was then later plugged into a 24-track studio board with other overdubs added on that 24-track board and onto 15 reels of tape. The signature barking that you'll hear in the track was performed by Manny and Raul. The inspiration came from how kids would actually react to big records being played at the club The Fun House, where he sometimes frequented. The Oberheim expander module was triggered through the pulse output from the 808. Also plugging the pulse output from the 808 to the synth to give it syncing. Manny says that the sync would actually lose though after about 16 bars, and so he had to roll back the tape and manually trigger and pulse again in order to keep sync. It was a very difficult task to get all this synced up and fine-tuned correctly. And by the end of the session, he had a mishmash of sounds which were later arranged by literally spicing the tape carefully in order to put the song together. After, of course, doing lots of cocaine. After putting the song together into a structure, the song we now know as Hip Hop Bebop Don't Stop was eventually developed. He's remixed and produced and worked with various artists such as Boy George, Michael Jackson, Gloria Gaynor. He later served as the road manager and even much more for the Village People. Parrish has produced, mixed, and performed on over 40 records, including among his own recordings, The Village People, Michael Jackson, Boy George, Gloria Gaynor. His first album was called Parrish and was released in 1982. The Jonzun Crew. Larry Curtis Jonzun, born July 14, 1953. Better known by his stage name Maurice Starr, and also known as The General, is an American musician, songwriter, and record producer. In 1982, Starr discovered the band New Edition on his talent show. He co-wrote and co-produced their debut album with the hits Candy Girl, Is This the End, and Popcorn Love. Subsequent to the album's success, creative differences resulted in Starr and New Edition actually parting ways. Jonzun was a member of the Johnson Brothers, not to be confused with the Brothers Johnson from Los Angeles, California, and the seminal electro group known as the Jonzun Crew with brothers Michael Jonzun and Sonny Jonzun. It was in 1980 that Jonzun changed his name to Maurice Starr. What he did for electro-funk was huge. The concept was out of this world. The group carried its spin on Parliament Funkadelic's loopy sci-fi themes of Afrofuturism, visions of outer space, futuristic technology, and even the video games of the time. According to Michael Jonzun, Pac-Man was intended to capitalize on the Pac-Man craze of the time. They pressed this song up Pac-Man. They pressed it up on Boston International record label. However, he remade the song so it wouldn't be about Pac-Man, fearing that possibly they may incur lawsuits because of that video game being so popular. So they called the song Pac Jam. Later singles successfully came out, such as We Are the Johnson Crew, Space is the Place, and Space Cowboy. An entire 6-track album was released, including a bonus version of Pac Jam. Look out for the OVC. The OVC being the outer visual communicator. The album was reminiscent of sci-fi television shows, even entitling the album Lost in Space. Juan Atkins. Juan Atkins was born September 12, 1962. Also, he was known as Model 500 and Infinity. He's an American record producer, and he's from Detroit, Michigan. At an early age, he played guitar and bass guitar in funk garage bands with his friends. After his parents split, he moved to Bellevue, Michigan. In junior high school, he met Derek May and Kevin Saunderson. These guys later became huge electronic music producers in their own right. These three would later be known as Belleville Three. At the age of 15, he bought his first synthesizer, a Korg MS-10. Juan Atkins formed Cybertron with Richard Davis in 1980. The duo's debut studio album, Enter, was released in 1983. It became a huge classic electro and spawned the Detroit techno sound. Juan Atkins has stated that George Clinton's band Parliament and Funkadelic were important to his musical awakening. He grew up listening to the Electrifying Mojo's radio shows. He also acknowledged that Kraftwerk was one of his main influences in his music. At least 50,000 copies of Clear single were sold, according to an article in Wire, which describes the song as groundbreaking, first-generation piece of pure machine music. This song is regularly sampled in later Miami Bass records and also in Missy Elliott's featuring Sierra and Fat Man Scoop with their 2005 hit Lose Control. Ray Pinky Velazquez. He was born May 28, 1955. He's a Latin American sound producer, mixer, and remixer. He is the co-founder of Legends of Vinyl and is known for tracks including groups like Twilight 22, a huge influence in electro, Funk History. He was the A&R man and disco consultant for the Vanguard Record Dance Music Department. Twilight 22 was an American electro band led by melody genius and synth wizard Gordon Bahari, but also featuring lead vocalist and co-songwriter Joseph Salter. Bahari was a student of soul and jazz and greats such as Stevie Wonder. He was also a great keyboardist and melody writer, of course. Electric Kingdom was released as a 12-inch single in 1983, shortly after Planet Rock and Looking for the Perfect Beat were released. It was also included on their 1984 debut album, Twilight 22, by Vanguard Records. Ray Velazquez discovered Bahari after listening to his cassette tape and ended up solidifying the deal on Vanguard. Ray saw the genius in Bahari as far as being a melody writer and knew that his melodies would be phenomenal if combined with the planet rock rhythm tracks of the sound of the day. He was correct. Electric Kingdom peaked at number 7 on U.S. R&B charts and became an electro-funk classic. The follow-up to Electric Kingdom was Siberian Nights, that followed the same Middle Eastern melodies put to an electro rhythm. These two songs may have inspired artists from the West Coast that took that same theme but to the next level in evolution of electro music in the early 80s. Or it may have just been a coincidence. Coincidentally, just in line with the ideas already being promoted by another great electro-funk artist, the Egyptian Lover. The Egyptian Lover, Gregory Broussard, was born in Los Angeles, California, and started out as DJ with Uncle Jam's Army, DJing dances as large as the LA Sports Arena, with 10,000 people attending these parties. He began recording around Los Angeles in 1982 as a member of the radio crew, as well as Uncle Jam's Army. So this was before Electric Kingdom came out, but his music was reminiscent of Middle Eastern themes, Egyptian themes, and so forth. His whole persona is based on characters of old movies, and again, the themes of the Egypt and Middle East. Most of the Egyptian Lover's successful recordings were 12-inch singles. He eventually released some of the earliest rap LPs, but they were less popular than his singles were. On the strength of an alternate mix of his most popular single, Egypt, 1984, On the Nile, was moderately successful. After a break in the 1990s, Egyptian Lover returned in 1994 with Back from the Tomb, his first full-length album in over 10 years. But it all started in 1983, recording at Russ's studio in LA. He recorded Egypt, My Beat Goes Boom, and What is a DJ if he can't scratch? He played these records on the Uncle Jam's Army parties. He made a huge impact by always repeating his name in the records. His baby, as he calls it, is that TR-808 rolling. He was introduced to it by his friend from New York, Afrika Islam, who was there to see the recording of Planet Rock. So he went out and bought an 808 after discovering what machine they were using for drums, and he wrote the beat to Egypt and composed the melodies and lyrics using the vocoder, and the rest of his is history. He performs all over the world to this day, DJing in various venues and performing his songs. Egyptian Lover and Uncle Jam's Army gave rise to another influential electro producer like the Arabian Prince, the world-class Wrecking Crew that included Lonzo and Dr. Dre, among others. And during these early 80s, another hip-hop phenomena launched on the world scene. These guys would also bring the electro sounds to the streets of New York and abroad. Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. Joseph Sadler, popularly known by his stage name Grandmaster Flash, is an American DJ and rapper. He is considered to be one of the pioneers of hip-hop DJing, cutting, scratching, and mixing. Emerging from the South Bronx in the early 1970s, Grandmaster Flash is inarguably one of hip-hop's original innovators. In the earliest days of the genre, he manipulated music by placing his fingers on the vinyl, perfected beat looping and discovered many of the most iconic beats still commonly sampled today. The song Scorpio is a 1981 track by Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, released in 1982 as a single from their album The Message. It reached number 30 on the R&B single chart and number 77 on the UK single chart. It was dubbed the greatest early electro track by many music historians and writers. The track was named after one of the members of the group, the rapper Scorpio, who is Eddie Morris, aka Mr. Ness. The group was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2007, and they also continued to tour the world to this day. So as electronic music evolved in the 80s, it seemed a natural fit that hip-hop would embrace the music form for several reasons. Electronic music provided a fresh new sound. Producers like Arthur Baker, John Roby, Man Parrish, Ray Pinky Velazquez, Egyptian Lover, Dr. Dre, and others would be a catalyst for electro-funk that of course led to other hybrids and genres like freestyle, techno, Miami bass, and the early house music. Today, just about every popular musical genre, from modern rap, trap, drill, dirty south, pop radio, R&B, and different shades and tones of electronic EDM has been directly influenced by the gradual evolution of incorporating electronics and computers with music. It could be said that the majority of music being listened to today is in fact electronic music, electronic music, electronic music, electronic music, electronic music, electronic music.